Hi, welcome. It's Monday, April 23rd, and in our reading today we have this very difficult passage related to Uzzah and the transporting of the ark to Jerusalem. And it's difficult in the sense that it seems like the punishment was rather harsh for what looks like it was a good deed on the part of Uzzah. But what we have to realize here and remember is that there were already specific instructions given on how the ark was to be moved, and these were not followed. And a couple of things that I want to point out in this today is, number one, certainly David's trying to bring the ark to Jerusalem, as we know, consolidate his standing as the king over the entire kingdom. And if the ark is really that symbol of God's presence amongst the people, then it needs to be basically, in David's mind, where the king is. And the other piece going along with this is that David and Uzzah really contrast their attitude towards God by the way they act in regards to this whole transportation thing. And I think that's really the important part of the story here. If you remember, in this case, Uzzah transports the ark on a cart, and we know that's wrong because we've already read about how it's to be done, and that becomes the big mistake. I was thinking back, one commentator I read, if you remember back just a little while earlier, the Philistines possessed the ark that they had captured for a while. It caused them great problems. They finally put it on an ox cart, and it didn't need any help at all, and it made it all the way back to the Israelites. No problems there. We should not think that somehow this was just an accident, that the cart was not able to hold the ark and the ark accidentally kind of fell off the cart. Clearly God's hand is in this. God stopped the procession. God made the ark tip off of the ox cart. Because what God needed to show is His sovereignty, His holiness, and that the people were not following His guidelines. The reality is Uzzah was part of the Kohathite clan within the Levite tribe. Their job was a matter of logistics. They were to take the tents and the poles and all the stuff, bundle them up, and that was what they were to transport. It was only the Levite Levitical priests who were to be about the business of handling the holy things of God, and they were to not really touch the ark either. That was all to be done with poles, as you recall, and that's the problem here. And so when the ark begins to tip, Uzzah may think he's doing a good thing protecting the ark by putting his hand out. R.C. Sproul said in his book, The Holiness of God, Uzzah assumed his hand was less polluted than the earth. But it wasn't the ground that would desecrate the ark, it was the touch of man. That was the reason there was this separation and the need to use poles and to do it very carefully. God is holy, man is tainted by sin, and therefore this is how God set things up. Uzzah, on the other hand, thought he was doing something in a more expedient, efficient manner, and what he realized is that he kind of had God pictured as this box, this ark that he would take care of. The truth is, Uzzah was not in charge. God was in charge, and that was Uzzah's problem here. Now, on the other hand, David sees the problem, stops the procession immediately, goes back, and now on the second time around they do things properly. And David is so excited and jubilant at the entry of God into the city that through the ark that he's literally dancing. Of course, his wife thinks that's demeaning and probably thinks that's not the way you act before God. What David is showing is his unreserved joy and excitement at the presence of God. That is proper. That is acceptable before God. There's no punishment for that. So we learn a couple of things out of here. Number one, that on the one hand, we have Uzzah, who's present in the presence of God, who ultimately dies because he is irreverent. He does not treat God with the holiness that God demands. On the other hand, we have David, who gets so excited by the presence of God and the mercy that God has shown him that he literally is dancing. And so I think that gives us some idea of how we should treat God with a sense of reverence and awe and holiness because of who He is. But we also should be unrestrained in our joy and excitement before Him. And in the end, it's comforting to know that ultimately Jesus comes to pay the price for that sin. And when Jesus, the only human not to have sinned, dies, that price is paid. The curtain is torn in two. We now can enter that Holy of Holies. We now can have that relationship with God because the price for our sin has been paid by the one high priest. So we can now reverently acknowledge and celebrate the holiness of our God. And on the other hand, we now realize the enormity of the love and mercy and grace that God has given to us through Jesus and His payment for our sins. And that ought to cause us to dance for joy as well. And so today, glorify God, but also dance before God. Celebrate the gift He has given you in Himself. And I pray you have a great day today.